Hello and welcome to DSW's Endpoint Assessment for the Level 2 Financial Services Customer Advisor Standard. My name's Isobel, I'm a product owner at DSW and I'll be talking you through this standard today. This recording is designed to give you an overview of what will happen during Endpoint Assessment, what to expect, when it will take place, but also how apprentices can prepare and what support is available. By the end of this, you should have a clear understanding of how the process will work and what the requirements are. And, of course, if there are any questions or anything you need more information on, we'll show you where to go for any additional support at the end of the recording. Today we'll be discussing what the endpoint assessment process looks like, how and when it will be delivered, what happens during the assessment itself, and we'll go into more detail about the Financial Services Customer Advisor Standard, how each assessment method works, and how it will be graded. What is endpoint assessment? This is what we call the series of assessments an apprentice must take to prove they're able to do the job for which they've been training. These take place once the on-programme period is complete and the apprentice is deemed ready for endpoint assessment. Assessment design and delivery. DSW create assessment materials in line with robust design principles that are recognised by Ofqual. These principles are validity, reliability and comparability, manageability and minimising bias. This means you can be assured that our assessments are appropriate for the standard, that everyone will get the same experience, that the assessments will be consistent and fair, and that everyone will have a chance to succeed. When does endpoint assessment happen? Endpoint assessment begins when the on-programme phase has been completed, required functional skills have been achieved, and the employer and apprenticeship training provider agree that the apprentice is competent. The next stage is called Gateway, and it's when the apprentice begins preparing for the endpoint assessment process. What happens during endpoint assessment? The apprentice completes the assessments detailed in the assessment plan. There is still an expectation that the apprenticeship training provider will support the apprentice through the endpoint assessment period. This is to ensure they're familiar with what's to come and so mock exams can be completed. In order to pass and be deemed competent, the apprentice must pass all of the assessments. This typically happens over a period of 4 months from the point they're approved for Gateway. Here we have an overview of the assessment methods used for the Financial Services Customer Advisor Standard. Each endpoint assessment for this standard contains 2 assessments. The learning outcomes which are assessed in each assessment method and amplification are detailed in the Learning Outcome Mapping document, which can be found in the toolkit. The assessment methods are a portfolio of evidence and a professional discussion. We'll look at each method in a bit more detail now. Portfolio of evidence. The portfolio of evidence enables the apprentice to present examples of their application of the knowledge, skills and behaviours of the standard. Compiled in the last 3 months of the on-programme phase with guidance from the employer or training provider, the apprentice will select appropriate evidence to meet the learning outcomes detailed in the referencing table. The portfolio should demonstrate attainment of the skills and behaviours identified in the standard, show application of learning and skills, and contain substantial real-work tasks. The toolkit provides guidance on what type of evidence can be included in the portfolio and a steer on how to ensure the evidence is sufficient, authentic, relevant, and current. The apprentice will need to complete the referencing table in the toolkit to reference all work within the portfolio to each learning outcome. Prior to the portfolio being submitted to DSW, it will need to be reviewed by the employer and training provider. The declaration form in the toolkit must be completed by both parties, outlining the grade they believe the apprentice is on track to achieve, along with the rationale. This will need to be submitted as part of the portfolio. The portfolio will be submitted to DSW and the assessor will review the portfolio prior to the professional discussion taking place. The assessor will make the decision on the grade and will take into consideration the views of the employer and training provider. For the apprentice to progress to the professional discussion, a minimum of 22 of the 30 learning outcomes must be met at a pass or above within the portfolio. Any learning outcomes which are partially met in the portfolio must be met in the professional discussion. Any learning outcomes where there is no evidence will be graded as a fail, which would lead to the portfolio being a fail overall. Once the assessor has assessed the portfolio, they will advise the apprentice if they have covered enough of the learning outcomes to progress to the professional discussion. Summative feedback will be provided on the portfolio at competency area level. This will be available to download from EPA Pro once the portfolio result is released. Context statement. When we refer to a context statement, we want to know what the apprentice has done in a specific situation: who, what, where, why, and when. Build a picture behind a specific situation, and from there they can pull on pieces of product and performance evidence which demonstrate exactly what they've done in relation to the context statement. It's a great way for apprentices to bring all of their evidence together and give a more rounded picture of what they're capable of. They do need to make sure they corroborate what they've said in their context statement with evidence, as the context statement is classed as anecdotal. Evidence types. There's no minimum or maximum in terms of pieces of evidence to be included in the portfolio. One piece of evidence could span several learning outcomes, so they could use one context statement and additional pieces of evidence to cover multiple outcomes. Conversely, they may find that some learning outcomes require several pieces of evidence in order to meet them fully. A piece of evidence might be a single document, or it may be a folder containing a number of documents which link together. We're looking for quality rather than quantity, having the apprentices think about examples of specific situations they've been involved in, which would allow them to demonstrate multiple areas of the standard. We'll go now on to different types of evidence. Types of evidence. As you can see, there is a wide range of evidence types, and this list is absolutely not exhaustive. You may find that the evidence you choose to provide is different to what appears here, which is absolutely fine as long as it's demonstrating those learning outcomes. We do ask that videos and recordings are a maximum of 2 hours within the portfolio, and they need to be time-stamped in the referencing table. Evidence stipulations. All evidence must be clearly labelled, dated and referenced in the portfolio referencing table. All documents should be amended appropriately to ensure confidentiality and data protection are adhered to. DSW will provide a set of evidence templates. Evidence must be sufficient, authentic, relevant and current. Sufficient means that enough evidence must be produced to clearly meet all of the relevant learning outcomes in full. Sufficient does not mean a mass of evidence. It simply means collecting enough quality evidence to demonstrate competence. Authentic evidence means that you must be able to explain and substantiate the evidence put forward. It's important to ensure that only evidence that relates to your own performance is submitted. There's a declaration to be completed at Gateway to confirm that the evidence will be authentic. Relevant evidence means that evidence provided must relate clearly to the learning outcomes, the job role and your performance. Avoid the inclusion of reference documents, training materials and other evidence that simply bulks out the portfolio. Current means evidence relating to knowledge, skills and behaviours that you currently demonstrate. These will tend to be your best work. Evidence should be gathered and collated in line with the time frame specified by the standard. Professional discussion. As part of the endpoint assessment, the apprentice will take part in a professional discussion with the endpoint assessor. The purpose of the professional discussion is to explore 9 learning outcomes. Up to 8 of these can be where the learning outcome has been partially met in the portfolio. The remainder of the 9 can focus on the potential to demonstrate distinction. The discussion will also assess the softer skills of the standard, exploring what has been produced in the portfolio, how it's been produced, and how well they're performing in their role. Ask questions about the evidence submitted in the portfolio, for example, application of the apprentice's knowledge in the role, and discuss how the apprentice has progressed in their role, what they've done, and their approach to work. The professional discussion will be carried out remotely using video conferencing and will last for 60 minutes. The training provider will ensure that the apprentice is given support so they are comfortable with the technology to be used ahead of the interview. The apprentice will receive a copy of the completed assessment record ahead of the professional discussion taking place to allow them to prepare for the discussion. The apprentice can bring notes and their portfolio to the professional discussion. The endpoint assessor will have questions and discussion points for each of the 10 areas which will be discussed in the professional discussion. This includes a section on the apprentice's development and approach to work. The portfolio and discussion will be graded synoptically by the endpoint assessor based on the standard and grading criteria. Final judgment and the overall grade for the apprenticeship will be made by the endpoint assessor following completion of the professional discussion. The overall grading and summative feedback for the professional discussion will be provided on the assessment record. This will be available to download from EPA Pro once the result is released. Scoring and grading. There are 3 levels of achievement within this apprenticeship: fail, pass and distinction. There are 30 learning outcomes within the standard, and to achieve an overall pass, the apprentice must demonstrate competence against each learning outcome. A minimum of 22 learning outcomes must be met within the portfolio. Any learning outcomes partially met in the portfolio must be met in the professional discussion. To achieve a distinction, in addition to meeting the pass criteria, the apprentice must achieve a distinction in all of the learning outcomes within the customer service, delivering results, teamwork, and personal development learning areas, and achieve distinction in 3 further areas selected from skills and behaviours. The professional qualification will count as one of these distinctions if this was passed at distinction level. The 2 assessment methods are cumulative. The overall outcomes across both portfolio and professional discussion will determine the overall grade achieved. Thank you for watching. We hope this has been helpful. As always, we are happy to help if you have any questions or need any more information, so please do get in touch. You can email us at info@dswapprenticeships.co.uk or give us a call on 01302 760 008. Thank you.